developing here in the cave called Ogafunanzi. Someone in the cave, there's been a rock fall.
A rescue operation is underway after a man fell and was injured while caving in the Brecon Beacons.
It's the biggest cave in Wales, but it's only for the very experienced cavers.
It's already the longest cave rescue in the history of South Wales.
A few more details emerging about this man. He is in his 40s and an experienced caver and is well known in the caving community.
It was meant to be a 5 or 6 hour easy trip, and little did I know it was going to turn into a 50, 60 hour epic. Where, you know, I could have never come out of there again.
We do know that he has received multiple injuries.
I mean, I feel incredibly lucky to be alive. I feel incredibly lucky to be able to walk. I mean, I'm a stubborn git that just won't die.
Casualty has significant deformity of the lower leg, chest.
Fairly hideous confirmation that the injuries are significant.
First aid team are requesting the stretcher with the full.
You're deploying stretcher teams, you're needing professional medical help in this case. Rebecca Specht came up first on the list.
When we got the call out from the cave rescue team, my husband and I were both packing up our camper van, ready to come up to the club with our children for the social weekend that was due to be happening. So we grabbed our rescue kit as well and put that into the van. They did tell me that the casualty was George, who I knew.
But Becky's actually a mum, and a relatively new mum, so she's got children that needed looking after. So Becky prepped herself and she joined a stretcher party underground.
I was a little apprehensive about going underground because my youngest was only 17 weeks old and I hadn't left him for more than an hour before. It was particularly challenging being away from him because he's breastfed, but my husband is a very hands-on dad and he had some express breast milk, so I knew that they'd work it out between them. I was also feeling a bit intimidated about the physical challenge because in November 2020 I caught COVID at work and I suffered from long COVID and had been very unwell for a number of months. So I hadn't done anything anywhere near as physically challenging as this for over a year. And so I knew it was going to be a real challenge for me to get to George in the first place.
One of the things we were worried about was that he was potentially bleeding internally. And the problem with internal bleeding is that you can't see it. You can't really do anything about it outside of a hospital, but you can bleed into your tummy or into your pelvis, your entire blood volume, and obviously that would be fatal. So we were suspicious that was happening, but there really was nothing we could do about it. We knew that we needed to get him out. We knew that we needed to keep him as warm as possible so that his blood would clot. You can give a bit of fluid, but giving too much fluid can make it worse. And we did give him some tranexamic acid, which can help slow the bleeding down. But ultimately, if it's something that needs an operation, you need to be somewhere where they can do one of those, and that's a hospital.
On the surface, it really ebbed and flowed. There were times when things were relatively quiet. We were managing the rescue in the control room. We were dealing with incoming communications. We were calling people out. And there were times when it was bedlam. At one point, I remember being outside. There were cars everywhere. There were more than 50 people around me. And we had people inside sleeping. And we had loads of people in the cave. So there was just this sense of something really big happening.
I don't recall a rescue within Britain that's ever been like that before. And, you know, almost 300 volunteers in different capacities. It was just absolutely phenomenal.
As soon as we started hearing some of the numbers involved, first of all over 100, then over 200, in the end, over 300 people involved in getting George out of that cave.
It became apparent to me partway through the rescue when I started recognising faces not only from Wales but also from the Mendips and the Peak District and Forest of Dean and Yorkshire, that people were coming from all over the country to come and help rescue me, and a lot of them as well. But I was on so much morphine at that point that I actually didn't recognise them. So they were kind of talking to me and there was banter going backwards and forth, and I can't remember exactly what I said, but at some point after being really quite cheeky to them, I kind of looked at them and said, "Who are you again?"
We are all volunteers. We are all from different walks of life, different parts of the country. And everybody came together as one team to help rescue George.
Caving is a fairly niche sport. There's thousands of us rather than tens of thousands of us, and yeah, you see each other around. And when you see the rescues happening, you always see some friend or mate that's involved with the rescues, and it is a comforting thing to know that should the worst happen, you've got friends to call on as well as professionals.
It sounds bad, but hearing him screaming from the bottom of the pitch was reassuring in that he was able to make enough noise that I could hear him from that. It may seem callous, but if you can hear someone from 30 metres away, they're clearly breathing relatively well.
The pitch was probably one of the worst parts of the rescue for me because I was fully conscious for it, and it really wasn't a very pleasant experience. About halfway up the pitch I did start vomiting, which obviously went all down my front, and I hope no one was standing below me because my jaw was too broken for me to be able to shout, "Look out below."
One of my colleagues, Greg, who was with him on the rope, did a lot of work trying to stop him from vomiting into his own face and trying to make sure that his airway was okay as he was coming up, because obviously George was strapped into a stretcher pretty tightly, so he can't move around. And if someone's vomiting in that position, then that can be very, very bad.
And at the same time as that started happening, I started hitting the really tight bits of that vertical journey. I was plastered against the wall a couple of times. I wasn't convinced I was going to fit a couple of times. And I was, essentially manhandled by necessity through gaps that were barely large enough to take me in the stretcher, all the time whilst vomiting and feeling sick. It really wasn't very nice.
When he got to the top of the pitch, he went horizontal again. He felt a lot better, and we dosed him up with some more painkillers and some more anti-sickness medication.
I was given some more pain relief, and it turned out to be quite a good thing, because what I thought was going to be fairly plain sailing for the rest of the trip turned out not to be.
Good evening. It's already the longest cave rescue in the history of South Wales, and efforts are still continuing tonight to save an injured man.
As things went on into the next day, into the Monday, we probably saw more press here than we've ever seen on any rescue. There was a very large number of people here.
By then it was clear this just wasn't a local cave rescue. People had come in from across the UK. We were broadcasting to the rest of the UK, and as the hours went on, that news was going across social media right across the world.
So speaking personally, I never really realised how big a story it was until the next day. So it was the day after the rescue was over that I really knew that it was an international story. On a lot of the cave rescues we undertake, we don't see the press at all. It all happens within several hours and it's over with and we don't see the press. On larger rescues, we know the press will get involved at some point, but during the Sunday we started to see press arriving. We probably saw more press here than we've ever seen on any rescue.
When we got there, there was one or two of my colleagues from BBC Radio there. We were the first TV crew, but then during the day, the media circus grew. Colleagues from ITV, from Sky came along, news agencies as well, because now news filters out so quickly on social media, everyone very quickly realised there was something extraordinary happening here.
There was this massive media machine that was moving. They were tracking friends down on Facebook, sending messages through. Nobody sort of figured out that I was involved at that time, but I'm a fairly well-known cave photographer, so I was getting a lot of requests for photos of the cave. If I had photos of tight bits of cave with cavers stuck in it, did I have photos of cavers drowning? It was horrendous things that the media were asking for.
So the route from where George fell to coming out of the top entrance, we can consider that in phases really. The first phase was getting him from where he fell into the main Cwm Dwr cave. The second phase was moving him from Cwm Dwr to the start of the streamway. Then the long period was the streamway. It's a long way up the streamway. You're going upstream, so the water's flowing against you. The next phase was to go up from the streamway up into the upper levels, and that's where the pitch hall took place. And then the final phase was to go from the top of the pitch and out of the cave through the top entrance.
I was tasked with going underground to act as an assistant underground trawler for the last phase of the rescue. Normally we would have one underground controller, but with so many people now involved in the rescue, it actually required more than one to actually manage that whole process. We now knew that there was a very good chance that we were going to get George out to the surface. The morale was definitely increasing. In a sense, we had to be a little bit careful with this because it's quite easy, obviously, once you get excited, you're getting close to the entrance, to get a bit carried away. So one of the tasks actually was just to try and make sure that the team stayed focused on the task at hand.
So when you're doing this trip as a caver, once you've moved up to the higher levels of the cave, you're pretty much on easy street. So I was expecting things to be pretty easy from here on out, and that really turned out to be not the case.
George certainly found that the longest part of the rescue because he thought it would all be over really quickly.
The passages from the top of rescue pitch towards the exit are really very tight, certainly with a stretcher. At one point I was used almost like a human drill bit because there was only one way of getting the stretcher through a certain passage, and that orientation kind of changed as the passage went on. So I was kind of lifted, moved forward and rotated all at the same time, and during that movement I actually ended up losing another tooth on the cave wall.
And I think that was stressing quite a lot of us out, the fact that we thought actually it should be over now, but it was because people were doing the right things.
We eventually popped out into Salubria's passage, which basically means that the cave passage got a lot larger and quite a lot easier to negotiate. And it was quite an amazing experience really, that last part of the journey, because there were just so many people there.
We kind of made a decision that people, if they wanted to stay underground through towards the end of the rescue, then we would let them do so. And that meant that we actually had, towards the end, we had something in the region of 70 people in the stretcher party. You would see this kind of long string of people, a human chain, ahead of the stretcher, and then the stretcher almost kind of gliding along this chain towards the exit. That was quite a sight to see.
These passages were just lined with people, and they were passing the stretcher with me on it from person to person to person, and there really was a sense of we're nearly there, and of it being the home straight. You know, that really lifted my mood as well. You know, I almost enjoyed that last part of the trip. You know, from my perspective, it was kind of a sea of faces going past me on both sides, just person after person after person. And some of them I knew, some of them I didn't know. You know, there were sort of smiles and nods of respect, and even little bits of banter and jokes went backwards and forwards. And yeah, it was amazing.
So at the very end of the rescue, we were crammed into the small control room, waiting for that news that George had finally reached the surface and fresh air, if you like. So it's quite hard to sort of explain your feelings at that point. You'd been involved in one of the most significant cave rescues in the UK. You were pretty exhausted, but by Christ, the adrenaline kicks in at that point and the euphoria. So to have that amazing news that he's on the surface, he's about to get in an ambulance and he's about to get to hospital pretty swiftly was amazing.
It's dark times in many ways, isn't it? Both politically, environmentally and all sorts of things. And in a small way, this is a really fabulous story. And it's all volunteer, it's all at their own time, it's all at their own expense.
I guess a rescue like this tells us that people are capable of incredible things. People can come together and achieve what seems impossible.
The dedication of everybody involved in it, absolutely every single person that was a part of that is absolutely phenomenal, and yeah, it makes me feel good about humanity.
I think after a challenging couple of years, incidents like this remind you that people are capable of really quite impressive things when they put their mind to it. It properly represented people from across the country within the caving community, and Dunkirk spirit, if you like, of everybody pitching in.
This cave rescue will go down in history. The way people pulled together for such a long period of time, in really difficult conditions, over 54 hours. It really was a special rescue.
When you think of the 300 volunteers involved, all those hours of work that they gave and gave freely, maybe they don't appreciate just how extraordinary this was, but I think we need to see them all as heroes.
It doesn't surprise me that they pulled it off. I know what cavers are like. They're bloody-minded, generally speaking, very strong personalities. They weren't going to let anything other than a good outcome come out of this. But just because it doesn't surprise me, that doesn't mean it's not amazing. What they achieved is absolutely incredible, and I take my hats off to them. I feel incredibly lucky to be alive. I feel incredibly lucky to be able to walk.
To be honest, it just feels really good that I'm able to get back up here again, you know. Being able to walk up a decent hill, and it's a win. Coming up here again does draw me in a little bit. It does have a bit of a pull. And yes, I would love to go caving right now, but no, we'll give it a little bit longer. When the winter comes, I'll look at getting back into the caves. To me, OFD's home and South Wales Caving Club is home.